点杂音，不知道什么声音。
哎，你共享了吗？
啊，对，我共享，可以看到我屏吗？
看到了，你有搞一下。
看不到。
现在呢？
能看到，能看到。
好的，那我开始。Hello everyone, and a pleasant afternoon to everyone. It's my first time to have a knowledge sharing meeting, so please bear with me. I hope that we would be able to learn a lot from it. And today, I will be presenting about the knowledge that I was able to accumulate regarding the React 18. So, and it's my pleasure to speak in front of everyone and share my knowledge. With that, let's dive into it. And if you are a React developer, there's no doubt you heard about React 18. Now, while there is still a lot more to come, I thought you might want to see what are its top new features. And I will introduce three top new features about React 18. The first one is automatic batching. The second one is transitions. And the third one is suspense and SSR. Firstly, let me start with automatic batching. And long story short, batching in React is whenever multiple state updates are combined into a single render. And you can see this picture. This is an example. We have we count the counter and set counter and count the click and set click. In this example, we might think a set count and set click would trigger two renders, but the reality is the component would only rendered once after handle click is called. And now, where this works well at the moment, if you are calling multiple state updates in a different context, such as promise, a callback, or timeout, React won't batch these two updates into one, and you'll get two re-renders when only one will have been needed. With React 18, all these use cases will now be covered, and the state updates will batched automatically, no matter what's the context. And this also this might also remind you of unstable batched updates that was doing exactly this. Well, now React will do it for you by default. And the third one is I will introduce a new feature about from React 18. It is flash sync, and if you happen not want this update to be batched, you will need to use flash sync. That will re-render your component every time it's done running the function while you are passing it to. So with the following, your component would render twice instead of just one time. I also prepared code to demonstrate it. And you can see here, we have a component in here. And we missed that. Yeah, you can see here we have a value and a state and an update button. And in this code, there has a button. It has an on-click event, and it also have an update function. If we click update button, and it will trigger re-render. And we have I will have a set timeout in here, and we also have a flash sync in here. Firstly, if we write off those words, if we don't use flash sync, since we have a console log render, so you can see the browser to you can see the console log in the browser. If we don't use a flash sync, if we click update button, we just get one re-render. If we use if we recover the code, if we use FlashSync, we will get refresh our browser, and if we click update, we will get multiple state out, multiple render because your component would render twice instead of just one time. So let's move on to next new feature. It's transitions, a really big new feature. 我没法全屏。哦，都在这儿。A really big new feature, which allows you to tell React which updates are urgent and which are not. A good example of that is a search input that should fit out a list of elements. If you are updating a search input, you'd want its value change. You'd want its value to change as we type. Although the search input might appear in a second phase when we're done typing. This is where we could mark the input value change as an urgent update and the element filtering as secondary, which is now called transition. Transitions can be interrupted by urgent updates, and previous transitions that are no longer relevant will be dismissed. This allows the user interface to only show its most up-to-date state and skip secondary updates transitions that might be slower to compute and sometimes return intermediate states that are irrelevant. As you can here, we have a picture, and we are marking the input value change as urgent and run our secondary update inside of transition, as it might trigger slower computations and could freeze or slow down the whole user experience as we type. Start transition is good for any update you want to move to the background, such as slow and complex rendering tasks, or when updates rely on fetching data that might take time due to a slow network. And I also prepare a code example. You can see, you can see here we have a search input. If we type something on search input, we will get the filtered result, right? So it's kind of like Baidu search or Google search. Yeah, and then we go back to the code, and you can see the input is in here, and it has an unchanged event. And it also has the unchanged value event function, and you can see in the bottom we have the filtered result. And if we type something on the input bar, and we will trigger the unchanged value, and you can see here there is unchanged value function, and we have set input. Input is belong to the value is belong to the input. You can see here value is equal to value, and we also have a set filtered value, and you can see here we have a filtered value. If we set filtered value, it will trigger the filtered items. It means it will change the filtered item is in here. That is the filtered result. And so since we use a new feature from React 18, that is start transition. If we use start transition, we can mark the filtered result as secondary, and we can mark the input change as urgent. So I think it would be helpful for the web application performance. Yeah. And the next one is suspense and SSR. So if you have a React application, you might know that if you are not using server-side rendering, aka SSR, your website always appears blank when you write for the first time. This because the browser needs to fetch and read your JavaScript, which takes some time before your component load and the page becomes interactive. With SSR, however, the user sees how your app looks directly, but without all the interactions while the JavaScript is being loaded. The way it works is by rendering all the components on the server first, then sending the result as HTML to the browser. After that, the JavaScript is loaded as usual, and HTML magically becomes interactive by what is called hydration. This turns your static HTML elements into your dynamic React components as you know them. The main problem with this process is that as long as the JavaScript haven't been fetched, loaded, your HTML hydrated, your page won't be interactive. To solve this what's issue, React 18 now offers 2 new features for the SSR. Is streaming HTML and selective hydration. Yeah, I will introduce these two new features, two new API. So for the streaming HTML, put simply, streaming HTML means that the server can send pieces of your component as they get rendered. This works by using suspense, where you will say which part of your application would take longer to load and which one should be loaded directly. If you think of, you can see the picture in here, and if you think of an article with the comments where the article is the critical part of the page, already marks the comments as the red color, and you could say load the article, but don't wait for the comments to be ready to send HTML to the browser. You could say you could show a spinner instead of using suspense, and once the comments are ready, React will send a new piece of HTML that will replace the spinner in place. And the next one is selective hydration. So now the second new feature, selective hydration, is quite a game changer, where before you have to wait for every component to render to begin hydration, leading the code splitting problems. Components now wrapped with suspense won't block hydration anymore. In other words, if you go back to our article page, the comments that we wrapped with suspense won't block the article and the other components to be hydrated. Every ready component will start hydrating, and the comments will too, once the browser gets both its content and JavaScript code. And the last crazy thing about selective hydration is that if you happen to interact with one of the components before it's being fully hydrated, meaning you click somewhere, for example, React will prioritize this component's hydration. This ensures that the most critical interactions are to be repeated as soon as we can hydrate the related component, making sure it's hydrated before the others. And the last part, I will introduce some new hooks from the about the React 18. The first one is use ID. Use ID is a new hook for generating unique IDs on both the client and the server, which while avoiding hydration mismatches, is primarily useful for component library in integrating with accessibility APIs that require unique IDs. And the second one is use transition. use transition and style transition let you mark some state updates are not urgent. Other state updates are considered urgent by default. React will allow urgent updates, state updates, for example, updating context input to interrupt non-urgent state updates. For example, rendering a list of search results. Yeah, that's all for React A18. Actually, I wasn't able to learn deeper about the React 18 since the time is limited. But I hope you were able to gain a lot of knowledge from me. I really appreciate everyone for attending this knowledge sharing meeting. Thank you.
有问题吗？有人用过没有？
我就看过。
没用过。对，才出来没多久。然后刚才讲的那个 transition， 我就想起来，它应该是 Fiber 支持的，因为之前 Fiber 对它的就是一个是分配的价格，它有优先级队列嘛，我就是在 Fiber 的支持下就可以做到这种。之前是自动，就是 React 它自动给你设优先级，现在的话看起来就是我们作为开发者可以自己设优先级，现在就更好控制一点，觉得挺好的一个道理。线上的有问题吗？没有，我最后再啰嗦几句啊，就是我可以跟大家讲一讲那个presentation， 就是首先今天2位的内容都非常棒啊，然后关于 presentation 我可以给一些改进建议。第一位是 Eddie 有一个就是那个重新播放幻灯片那个